Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co host, Kevin David Kridner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. First, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We aren't here to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally and we follow where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with others and with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, before we hit the record button, you and I were talking um, about the whole conversation that's especially in the writing community around the use of AI. And um, and what find is that there's so much heightened emotion around the topic that it makes it really difficult to actually get to some sanity of truth around it. The other thing too is that we have to recognize this past week I was diving into side note that we're not going to get into yet, but um, and one of the topics that surfaced was the idea of crystallized versus fluid intelligence. And
Mm,
we have to recognize that AI is a novel tool set, and it's similar to but distinctly different from other things that we've experienced. And so it's fair to recognize that a lot of our opinions around AI are being formed from that perspective. We're extrapolating from the closest similar thing that we can see and making inferences from that. And
right,
the more emergent that something is, the more varied I believe your perspectives are going to become. I think increasingly, the idea of is the internet good or bad, and all of these types of things. I think if you talk to almost anybody, they'll many people will land on a very similar frame around that
yeah,
it's tremendously productive, tremendously useful, has been used for tremendous evil. It's a tool. It's like all of those things. Social media is approaching that stage where increasingly people are admitting that, yeah, we recognize that, man, we love the fact that social media brings us together, but there's some really harmful aspects to it as well. There's an
yep,
awareness of that. It's evolved to that level of maturity. We've had enough of a shared experience around it. But with AI, we there's so many still so extraordinarily varied experiences with it.
right,
Um, and and partially because AI by itself is such a absolutely broad spectrum.
right, right. I guess the shocking thing to, shocking, it's not shocking, I say that sarcastically. The shocking thing to me is how many people just have very passionate ideas about it on both sides.
Right.
One, it's the savior, one, it's the devil. Like, and it's so polarizing. And that's the fascinating thing to me is that as human beings, technology has always been polarizing. I guess the question that comes to mind is, do you not see the same process happening with every leap forward in technology?
Well, and I think this would be a very fun conversation is to talk about the polarization of technology throughout history. So
Yeah.
if you think back, what can you think of some of the earliest? I mean, the printing press is probably one of the first things that comes to mind, but
Right. How catastrophic that was to a certain part of the population,
right.
namely the Catholic Church. The printing press was the devil. Because all of a sudden now you can take the Bible, you can take somebody's thoughts, feelings, and opinions, you can print them and you can distribute it. You
Right.
cannot control the information.
Right.
Like, go back and read. Go back and research. Look at how catastrophic the printing press was. Massive leap forward, objectively speaking. you can print and you can distribute content. Now,
Right.
that also means that in the beginning it wasn't like this, but as the printing press grew and became more accessible, you can also print content that isn't beneficial.
Right.
You know, look at the internet. You have access to a level of information that nobody in human history has ever had.
Right.
And yet the majority of what you find on the internet, or a lot of what you find on the internet, is corrosive to the human soul. But it's free will. You get the choice. You can engage with this thing, which is for knowledge's sake and its growth and its development and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, yes, or you can engage with cat videos and porn.
Yep.
I'm all for the cat videos because they
Yeah.
make me laugh. But like the thing that really sticks out to me is when you're demonizing, when you're polarizing, it's almost like we forget the concept of human free will. You get to choose how you engage with it. Bottom line.
So were there during the time of the printing press, and I don't know my history well enough to know the answer to this, but were there common people who were opposed to the printing press?
And see, that's the hard thing about looking back so far, is the common people's opinion wasn't really recorded. It certainly
That's fair.
existed, but it wasn't recorded for the most part. You may be able to find sources that say, a secondhand account of a common person, but a common person is not they don't have a keyboard in front of them getting on and typing their thoughts and sending it into the universe. So it would be really hard. And that's the difficulty with history in general,
Right.
is the story is told most often by the winners because they have the power to craft the narrative.
Right.
So, that's really a difficult thing. So we don't know. Now, we can assume based on human nature that common people had their feelings about it because we're common people and we have feelings about technology.
Well, and it's not hard to imagine a variety of responses. Kind of the um, kind of the delight of the age-old institution falling, the excitement of new technology emerging, all the way to um, will this disprove God? Where will society land? Society will now become, if we don't have the church controlling the narrative, society will then become a godless society. And I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why we might fight for or defend, but
Because
the
control was always the way that freedom spread.
yeah, yeah.
If we don't control the narrative, then the end of civilization is coming about.
Well, and if we don't control the truth and access to the truth, then people will be deceived. I
Right.
mean, literally, there's such a rationalization of the control of information. Um,
Yeah.
um, okay, so printing press. Um, are there other examples that come to mind for you?
I mean, think about nuclear energy.
Right, that's a great one.
Okay. So obviously the concepts theoretically were present for over 100 years. This is possible. This could happen. This may be a reality. Now, the necessity came. Now, we could argue whether it was a necessity or not, but that's not what we're here for. But the necessity came to develop that technology, and it was developed and it was used catastrophically, destructively. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there's no There's no getting around that concept. You can have your justification of the invasion of mainland Japan would have lost this many people. So you could have, and that's really just a academic intellectual exercise because the reality is that technology was used and it caused massive loss of life, not just in the moment, but for decades and decades afterwards. You could look at that and say it is 100% evil, should have nothing to do with it. But then we also have nuclear energy being produced, which is, I would say, an objectively good thing, an objectively good source of energy. So you've got both sides there. So look at the smartphone. Well, like look at this. I read this thing, and I forget where I got it from, but it was talking about turning points in history, and he was talking about his three turning points were electricity, because before that, the sun governed your work patterns. That was a massive change for humanity. The second one was the clock, because
Sure.
now nature is not guiding your rhythms. It's an artificial measurement of which time is an artificial measurement. We could go into that, but it's probably long-winded and boring, but it's artificial. And then the third one was the smartphone. How have those three affected our world? Those three technologies. And you could even go even deeper into the control of those things. So electricity. So we get this idea that Edison was the first one to develop these things. And the reality is, if you do any research whatsoever, Nikola Tesla had developed a methodology to provide free energy to the world. Free.
Mhm.
And he was pretty much utterly destroyed, depending on what account you believe. But he died penniless and broke and just a broken man in a hotel in New York City. Brilliant. Probably one of the most brilliant minds ever to have existed. And he wanted to use it for what would be objectively good, providing this resource to the mass of humanity. And he was destroyed for it. Okay. So that seems like a pretty interesting reaction to a technology.
It does. But each of these technologies we've also seen, I've been reading this story, the story recently, and it's a story of, and in the story, this guy's going to work in the factories, and the whole factory mindset is just really screwed up in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
where essentially it's incredibly difficult to reward people for good performance, um, and it's incredibly difficult to keep people from taking advantage of the system as well. Um, and so, but we see this where, to your point of electricity and the clock and dictating human work rhythms and overriding them. Like there's this season in history where it feels like that's been the override worked, and
Yeah.
then you just look at broad cultural trends over the last let's say 15 years, maybe 10 to 15 years, where suddenly itinerant work, work life, or remote work, work life balance, all of those things became
Mhm.
a very big conversation. And so it seems to me like if we had to map an arc, and this is I'm presenting this as a hypothesis because obviously it would have to be verified, but there's some capitalistic advantage to deploying a technology of some kind.
Mhm.
At which point the capitalistic extraction value gain, depending on how where it lands on the goodness scale, um, continues for season, and it reaches a point where the people who are locked into the system start asking a question, well, what am I really gaining from this? It's kind of
Hmm.
like I have all these free services. Wait, they're doing what with my information? Um,
Right.
and then there's this pressure, use cases um, change, they evolve. People start seeing the downsides of social media. Certain platforms cool off, other ones, you know, take off, and it creates a vacuum once
Right.
again. Um, and so there's a decline, um, and so those who are, have a commitment to the capitalistic path start looking for the next opportunity, for the next
Right.
thing that they can introduce. And I mean, it
And if it
really,
doesn't exist, I'll create it.
yeah, exactly,
I'll
exactly.
create if the market doesn't exist, I'll create it.
So find a way to tie this into people's deeply held desires, or sometimes let me alter. If you want to really get sinister, it's kind of like um, I mean, there's so many ways in which you end up with really bizarrely codependent industries. Like if you can hyper optimize your food for consumption, people will consume more. Um, and you also have the benefit of reducing the nutrition in the food that they're eating,
Hmm.
which creates a health crisis, which benefits yourself on the health sector, health, weight loss, fitness, all of those types of things.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why optimizing for capital gain is really harmful to
Right.
the human.
Right. Yeah, so we're set into these unnatural rhythms, and we just accept it as if this is the way the world is. Everything is pushing for greater urgency, for greater efficiency, for greater speed. And yet, the perpetual motion machine does not exist because friction is a thing and gravity is a thing, and
Right.
it will break down. And we as human beings are not excluded from that set of circumstances. We are not perpetual motion machines. But the society we live in, the world we live in, is pushing for greater urgency and efficiency. So
Right.
pushing, 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 pushing. And you will break down. And when it breaks down, what happens? Do I get time to recover and get back in the game? Or does the game pass me by? I'd never seen, and this is really interesting, I had never seen the show The West Wing. Like when it was on, and like all my friends were like, "Oh, you got to watch this show. Aaron Sorkin's a great writer," and I agree, he's a great writer. But like, I'd never seen it, so like one of my buddies is like, "Just sit down and watch it." So for the last couple of months, while I'm doing whatever it is, I have it in the background and I'm watching it. And what I see over and over again is these people are just cogs in a machine and they serve their function, and then once they break down they're put out to pasture.
Right.
And it's like that's not very human. We're treating people as if they're cogs in a machine, and then when they break down, and that, to be really honest, that's the scary thing for me with AI, because scary, concerning I should say, I'm not scared, concerned. The scary thing for me is, oh, this is a way I can be way more efficient.
Right.
For me as a person, it's like, oh, I could be more efficient this way. I could get more done. It's not a way that, oh, I could do this and it would give me more rest. It's I could use this and then I could be, while this is doing this, I could be over here doing this. And that's scary to me. In my hands, as a perfectionist, as a work, as somebody who will work themselves into the ground. You don't have to worry about me farming out my thoughts and feelings to AI and having to do the work for me. You don't do it. That's not a fear at all because that's just not who I am. I think the bigger danger for me as a person is working myself into the ground because I freed up so much time over here. And now I could be doing these seven things over here instead.
Right.
That's the danger for me.
But the challenge is that we have many people who are willing to make that sacrifice. And so if you are thinking of the world as a scarce resource, um, which is a whole other conversation, but um, there if you do that, there are the fear in many people's minds is, and maybe a reality, that there's 10 other people who are willing to fill that space.
Yeah,
And then what happens to you?
right,
And the fact that we have so many people competing so strongly, and willing to sacrifice so much to get to winning, whatever the winning is,
right,
that makes it very difficult to know how to live outside of the system.
right. And that's interesting, fascinating because like what is winning? How would we define winning? I think for each individual, there's probably a different definition. But I think as a people, as human beings, as we stand back objectively and look at the world, what does winning look like?
Well, that
If you were to just take a glance at, let's say, social media
sure.
or the news, which seems to be the same thing right about now. Neither of them trustworthy. I won't jump on that because that's a longer conversation. But you just take those two venues. What does winning look like?
Well, no, I mean, it seems to me like 99% of winning is controlling the perception, how
Right.
you're perceived by others.
And what do you want to be perceived as?
Popular, powerful, wealthy. I I don't know.
Beyond all of that.
Tell me.
Right. Because if you're
That's
right,
fair.
all those things will come. Popularity, money, power, if you're perceived as right, which is really, really interesting. Talk about zeros and ones, binaries, right and wrong. You're either right or wrong, which to me is utterly fascinating. That concept of right. Do you see right, the concept, the idea of being right? Do you see right as external or internal?
Well, I mean, well, continue expounding on that,
If you see right as internal, it is utterly subjective.
right?
If you see right as external, beyond you, then that has to be objective.
Well, but in the attempt, and but let's also nuance this more specifically, because internal can be subjective me, external can be subjective you, and external can also be objective God. And
Yes.
at the point that this whole machine becomes a game, it's just a game of, I mean, there's a lot of worlds in which marketing, sales, business, negotiation, influence, it's all about, I mean, it's not even about my sense of right. It's externalizing, the locus of control to externally, and it's all about trying to reverse engineer. What do I have to say for Kevin to believe that I'm right?
Right. What's the narrative I have to produce for you to believe I'm right?
Which implicitly creates a system. Then, I mean, there's no way you can do that without creating an echo chamber.
No, there's no way. There's no way. Unless you understand something, come to grips with something, accept something that you or I are not capable of right or wrong. We're only capable of being in alignment with right,
Right.
objective reality. Any right that we want to proclaim was always his. It was eternally pre-existent. So I'm not right. I'm just stepping into alignment with right. And we can't say right, truth is some ethereal concept. Right has to be a person.
Right.
It has to be embodied. And that person is Jesus. He is right. The embodiment of it. He is justice. He is love. He is truth. He is these things. So you want to run around saying you're right. Okay. And you may say it very sincerely, and you may mean it deeply. But if you're not in alignment with the person of Jesus, you are not right. You
Yeah.
are objectively wrong. No matter how passionate or sincere you are, you're objectively wrong.
So help me, if you don't mind, organizing some of the thoughts around this, like our discussion
Hmm.
from from winners crafting the narrative of history, from these inventions that like, can you tie these pieces together for me a little
Yeah,
bit?
well, let's take an example like World War II.
Sure.
In America, in our history lessons, what we learned is we were the good guys, and England was with us, and then Russia was with us, and we were the good guys. It's a very black or white narrative, right?
Sure.
Okay. So at the end of the war, we won. The good guys won. Germany, Japan, Italy, bad guys, they lost. We won. And you could be very, very sincere in that belief. Objectively, was it a good thing to stop Nazi Germany from what they were doing? Of course it was. Of course it was. To stop the Holocaust? Of course. To stop the land grab and the subjugation of the mass of the continent of Europe? Of course it was. To stop Japan from bringing Asia under its control? Yes, of course it was. But is it objectively true that we were the good guys? So look at any data from World War II, and we'll just take Russia as an example. the amount of deaths that occurred in Russia, the amount of his of the Stalin's own people that he killed, be it peasants, be it Jews, be it that kind of stuff, makes Hitler look like a schoolgirl.
Yeah.
Why don't we hear that?
Yeah.
You have to go looking for that information. But the winners told the history, and we don't necessarily teach it. There are some places where it is taught, but we don't teach it because Russia was on our side. They were part of the good guys. So what's the objective truth? The objective truth is that this was a horrific time in human history. That even in doing the right thing, we did it the wrong way in many cases. And millions and millions and millions of people lost their lives in this process. And it is a horror. That's the truth.
So fundamentally, the need to be right and to be perceived to be right, the logical conclusion of that is, first of all, you have to either be infallible Jesus or you have to hide facts to maintain that perception.
Yes. Yes. In being right, you're going to, as a human being, if you want to proclaim right, at some point you're going to have to hide facts.
Right.
You're going to have to create a narrative that's clean.
Okay. So then, if you don't want to hide facts, then you have to have a willingness to be wrong,
Yes. And that's
which
what we call humility.
is what we call humility. But being wrong doesn't bode well in the system.
No, that
And
functions on being right. And your position in society in the world is on being right.
so, what happens to people pragmatically who insist on being able to be wrong?
Mm.
Like, are they resigned to never having voices of influence?
Mm. In our world, maybe on the highest levels. When's the last time you saw a president stand up in front of the nation and say, I messed up. Should have done that differently.
That's a fascinating question.
Really dropped the ball on that one. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle or which group or which political party or which whatever. A CEO. When's the last time you heard a CEO stand up and go, "Yeah, really screwed that one up. Here's how I dropped the ball."
Right.
Unless they were utterly forced to. And then what came from the admission?
Well, there's never, I mean, that's what I was going to, yeah. Um, wow. It's very, I really wonder. One of these, I don't know enough of my history to know this because I'm like researching here now. Like there's all these
Hmm.
examples where it's like, yeah, there was a confession, but it was forced. Like, Um, but then there's this example of Kennedy and the Cuban invasion,
Hmm?
and he famously his quote was, "There's an old saying that victory has 100 fathers, and defeat is an orphan. I am the responsible officer of the government."
Right.
And in an odd moment, his approval ratings jumped because here's a president who actually takes responsibility.
You're like, wow, I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's rare. We should probably have some more
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. It's
But
really
many of these
interesting.
others that are listed here are just like, well, yeah, you kind of had to, or you were going to get canceled, or you were going to get something was
Right,
going to happen. And I mean, even in some of the things that we're seeing, right, wrong, good, bad, whatever it is, in kind of church culture and power and corruption and all of these types of things, there are apologies emerging, but it's difficult to know how much to trust an apology. I mean, certainly you can look at behavior going forward, to evaluate the sincerity of an apology, but it's also really difficult to evaluate whether it's a changed behavior or whether it's just tightened image management.
right,
And it also is very hard to tell when it is only when voices hit a certain critical mass that the apology arises. Like it's only when yeah. So this is absolutely and utterly fascinating.
right, right. And to not pile on too hard to, people in those positions, it is a unenviable position.
Oh yeah.
It is unenviable. And you come to these people with these expectations, like a savior-like mindset. And what does that do to a human being? That's an expectation. Like, say a pastor in a church, and we can debate what that role should be and what it historically was and all that kind of stuff. But in our modern world, the pastor of that church, and it would make people uncomfortable to think about it or to say it, but is somewhat of a savior-like figure.
Yeah.
The reverence for it. That is not a pressure that any human being should be under.
No.
Because that human being standing up there, delivering that message on a Sunday morning, is no different than you. They're a
No.
human being. Do you know what they experienced in the hour prior to walking up on that stage? You have no
No.
clue. You have no clue. It is an unenviable position. Now, the way we could handle that is through humility and communication. Hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm struggling with. But that would require a conversation. Most of us don't want a conversation with a savior. We just want them to solve our problems.
Well, I think one of the ways that you, we, I end up coping with that vulnerability is by, or can end up coping by that vulnerability is by finding a way to have that experience feed a need within myself. If I can feed the need, if I, or maybe to say it differently, like if I can use that experience to move the audience, to direct them towards my vision, to any number of those things, I no longer am vulnerable to their rejection because I'm the mastermind and they're the puppet.
Right.
Um, or that's a mixed metaphor, but you get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no
Right.
longer vulnerable
Right. Until you are.
until you are.
Because reality's going to hit. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Reality will hit because we're living a fundamental untruth.
Right.
Whether you
It's
say it out loud or not, the message is communicated. I'm right. Follow me. And if you believe you're the possessor of right, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because right is not yours to own. It's objective, it's outside you, it's eternally pre existent. What I see most often, like the imagery that makes sense to me, and this could just be me, is that truth, right, this is like a river that has eternally been flowing. And some of us stand and look at the river and talk about the river and observe the river.
right.
And when we step into the river, we start trying to direct it. And some of us are taken by the river and it just goes. We just flow with it. And those are the three responses I see most often to this concept of truth. Can I possess it? Can I control it? Can I utilize it? That's stepping into the river and trying to create a path or direct it. I can create this canal off the river
Right.
that it directs it to the water wheel, the energy source for me to accomplish what I want. Okay. But truth refuses to do that. It still flows straight down its path. It's that river in the Revelation metaphor that flows from the throne that strangely enough the tree seems to grow over. That's the river. That's the imagery that makes sense to me.
So, I mean, this lends itself to Jesus' statement about the sun shining on the just or the unjust. It lends itself to the book of Proverbs, where I've heard many people talking about reading a proverb every day and the success that it brought them. I mean, there are elements of, and that's just in the external world, but then we have that also with Christ of aligning ourselves with Him and who He is, um, and there's this sense in which, I mean, this ends up being a fairly um, you know, one of my most painful experiences in church centered around a denomination that had determined for itself what was, just drove a stake in the ground and said, ultimately what made it, what they were looking to do is looking to avoid, you know, the drift and movement of humanity, but accidentally ended up saying we own truth.
Right.
And there was no room for, um, I mean, really, if you look at it deeply, it ends up being a fairly arrogant statement to say that at this point of time, we have finally found the comprehensive eternal perspective and understanding of truth. Our understanding, we have achieved it
Right.
now
Right.
and forever.
Right. What is a church mission statement other than a owning of the truth?
Yes. So then there's this fundamental posture then, in relationship to truth, which basically comes down to loosening your grip. I mean, either you can hold something in a tight-fisted grip to own truth, or you can surrender yourself to the fact that you don't have ownership of truth, and your life ultimately comes down to rearranging yourself
All right.
to fit truth.
Right. Right. I had a mentor, and I may have mentioned this before, but she used to make two statements along these lines and stuck with me. This is decades ago that she said this. Um, she said, "Do you want to be right or do you want to follow Jesus? Because you don't get both. Because any right you think you have was already his from the
Yeah.
beginning of time." And then her other one, a little bit more pointed, was, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Because you don't get to do both."
That's fair.
But both of them are pointing to this humility that I am not the possessor of right. Think of how messy relationships our world get when somebody believes they're the possessor of right.
Yeah. And ultimately it's a lack of admission that what I hold is still only a perspective, and it's the elevation of that perspective to objective reality.
Right, right.
I had a very this is a very intriguing conversation at work several weeks ago, and one of my colleagues mentioned that they've been they held an opinion, and one of my other colleagues didn't agree with it, and you know couldn't get you know they kind of wanted to put this matter to rest. I was like, well, let's get on a call. Let's talk. Like, let's all three of us get together and get on a call and talk it through. And really ended up with option. If it went from option A to option B to option C, which nobody had fully understood or articulated before, but everybody was far happier with than any of the prior options that we discussed. And I mean, thereby, I've known and I'm reflecting on previous work experiences as well, where there was only this is the right way to do it. There was no and well, and I played my part in tight-fisted grip on truth, and I don't know exactly where I landed in these experiences. Um, but in order for this to work, I mean, this we I still keep circling back around to this idea of mutual submission. Like there has to be a shared submission and surrender to truth as an objective reality that we are in this
Right.
together to seek this out. And if even one person violates that or refuses to hold that perspective, it really I mean
It destroys the whole system.
destroys the whole system.
Yeah. I saw this meme. I was sharing it with my wife over the weekend. It said something along the lines of, "You think you're not powerful, you don't have control. Just remember, one turd from you can close down an entire water park."
That's great.
You have that kind of power. But it just takes one. I mean, obviously, funny, that kind of thing, but within a human system, it just takes one that is not willing to humble themselves in the presence of truth and say, "There is truth beyond me."
Yeah,
And that's not discounting my perceptions, because my perceptions matter, but
right.
they are not ultimate truth unless they're in alignment with objective ultimate truth. That's the reality.
Well, if you and take your statement further, it's also the striking the lengths that people will go to in desperation when they don't have a sense of control or a sense of involvement in a Um, hang on. Um, Somebody's completely got their time schedules completely bonkers and they're texting me about it. I'll just ignore them and let them look at the calendar and figure out their own life. The Some of these disruptions come simply because people feel so absolutely and utterly well, I mean, there's a host of reasons utterly powerless that they feel like they have to inject themselves into an otherwise, shall we say, peaceful environment.
Right,
And not always
right,
necessarily just from evil or ill intentions. Sometimes it's just the desperation of what they're experiencing that
right,
turns into a compulsion. And sometimes it is an attempt to get revenge. Um,
right.
so how does this tie into the AI conversation?
There's so many links here, so many connections. I wonder because we've specifically been talking about it in relation to writing and
Right.
how much fear there is around the concept, especially on writing platforms, publications, that kind of stuff. This is AI, this is that kind of thing. I wonder if we could go below the surface reality of the argument and see what's behind that.
Yeah.
The argument behind it, I hear, is you're cheating. You're getting a leg up.
The question I've been wrestling with that I haven't been able to answer, and I don't know how to answer, is how what is what is the fear? What is the thing that okay, let me take it back take a step back. Full transparency. I am probably more optimistic and sympathetic to AI adoption than I am against it. It's just
Right.
there's too many parts of my life that benefit too much from this. While also, I want to be honest about the I think I think we need increase to be increasingly vocal around its limitations and we need human connection more than ever. We need the things that make us be alive, like as humans, thrive as humans, Christ,
Yeah.
objective truth, relationship, all of that. So,
Hmm.
having said that, if you are an AI purist for the sake of the term, if you choose not to use AI at all in any of your that's an ideology. That's
Right.
what is it that you stand to lose if other people use it?
Right.
What do you have to stand to lose? What's the pain? What's the disappointment? What's the loss of control? What is the experience when you read an essay written by somebody else and discover later that it was that AI articulated those words,
Right.
not and it was not manually written.
Right. Yeah, it's a question to wrestle with, right? And each individual has to. Like the Solzhenitsyn said in the Gulag Archipelago, like the line of evil runs through every human heart,
Mm,
or the dividing line is through every human heart, good, bad. And he's saying choice and free will. And as I sit here thinking about it, if you approach this tool with curiosity, okay, I'm curious. If you approach this with to create a narrative, to fashion a persona, to make something that is not real, that is not you, then I have a problem with that.
right.
I see it no differently than great writers from the past who had secretaries and editors and publishing companies and all that kind of stuff. Because you take your ideas, you put them in very raw form, and then the editor molds and shapes and works with it and adjusts. And is that still your work, even though this editor has done that? One of the most common things for a writer to do is write something and then send it to people he wants their objective opinion from, and then they make comments on it, and then they shift the content potentially based on the comments and all that kind of stuff. It is a collaborative effort.
Right.
No creation is created in a vacuum. And it's very it's a very arrogant human thing to say, I did this all on my own. I built this company all on my own. I produced this, whatever, all on my own. No, you didn't. Nobody did.
Well, I mean, except for the fact that I learned to read from somebody else who taught me how to do it and was paid by dollars that I didn't earn for myself. Besides that, I basically did
Besides
everything.
that fact, yeah.
You know,
I mean, let's
like,
just throw that out the window. Yeah. As if I've never had a human interaction in my life that was impactful. Every last experience we have had has shaped who we are. And you want to make believe that if I sit down at this, once we're done here, I sit down at this computer keyboard and I start typing out my thoughts on this topic, that even if I don't run it through AI, if I don't send it to somebody to read, even if I don't do any of that, do you think that's still all me that's doing it?
right.
It's foolish. No, I am the sum total of all my experiences that have taught me and shaped me and molded me and bruised me and uplifted me and all these things. And I write from that place. And I can't write from any other.
I think another one of the fears in the use of AI is that there are casualties in because of it. There are, well, and again, this is I share my perspective. I don't know how this lands with everybody else, but there are people who genuinely are losing their jobs because they're being replaced with AI.
Mhm.
Now, I was um, spending time recently with my nephew and his wife, and she was saying that her brother, excuse the long backstory to this whole thing, but one of his favorite questions is like he'll be somewhere like at the grocery store, checkout lane, whatever, and she mentioned she started doing this. She'll just ask the cashier like, "So how do you enjoy your job? Do you enjoy what you're doing?" And 9 times out of 10, it's like, "No."
Yeah.
And my sister asked me this question. She's like, "What do you think this is?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know for sure, but like, think about. I mean, it's you have to get two things right. One, you have to enjoy the work you're doing,
Hmm.
and you have to enjoy the people you're doing it with.
Right.
And I know a lot of people who are really good at what they do, but they hate the work, or
Yeah.
they really love the people and they're really bad at the work, or they really love the work and they really don't like the people really aren't that great to work with or work for.
Right.
And to have the intersection of, okay, I don't even, maybe it's as basic as I don't hate the work and I don't hate the people. Like
Right.
that seems to be shockingly rare. Um, and so, but keep in mind too, like if we take a historical perspective, we used to have people who were responsible for tapping out telegraphs.
Right.
Um, we used to have people who would come out and, you know, pump gas for you. We don't have those
Right.
anymore.
Mm-mm.
Um, yes, those jobs are taken away, but there's a lot of people who didn't enjoy those jobs in the first place.
Right.
Also, the things that make you enjoy a job are often very transferable. What's actually fun about pumping gas? Is it lifting
The
the
actual
nozzle?
function of it.
Function, lifting the nozzle, sticking in there and squeezing the lever? Like, really?
Yeah,
Or is it the fact that you get to go see neighbor Sally and neighbor Joe who, you haven't seen in 2 weeks and catch up about, whatever it may be? And if
right,
it's the former, there are other types of mechanical things in the world that still need to be done. Yes,
right,
it's change. Change is hard. If it's the latter, there's still people, there's still roles that depend on you being able to make connections with other humans and maintaining relationships. And so, but I
right.
also understand it can be overwhelming for people in in that. Like
Hmm? Without a doubt. Yeah, not
how do you
minimizing that at all. It could be really, really, really soul-crushingly hard to have some sort of transition where I was doing this thing and I imagined that I was going to do it for the rest of my life, and then circumstances came about, and that's not a reality, and so I'm having to transition. That's a real identity refining experience. Of course it is. That's hard. It's really hard. But I think you hit on something really powerful. Like, what's the driving motivation? That checkout clerk who looks at you and goes, "No, I don't like it." The next question is, why are you still doing it? Well, I got bills to pay. I get that. We all do. But are you willing to trade the moments of your life for the financial security, however minimal it is, for being here? What do you want? What do you want out of life?
what I think, and a lot of people, a lot of people, okay, compensation is a factor of skill meets opportunity.
Hmm?
Um, and I feel like it's very easy. There's a few observations that I've had. One is that people can become so worn down in their role that they just start losing hope. Like they're so absolutely and utterly overwhelmed they can't even begin to fathom or think how to find something else.
Yeah,
That's a real thing. But also people become hyper internally focused. Um, they they think that the only differentiator between compensation is their skill level and how they
right,
present themselves. And there is certainly skill that's critical because every company that I know hires you to perform some kind of function, whatever it might be.
right,
But I feel like where many people miss it a bit is the understanding that there is also an opportunity that you can have very similar types of skills with different labels and different companies, different places of employment, and the label and the place of employment can both have significant impact on what compensation you get for that kind of a role. Um,
right,
I remember now this might not be the dream job for every writer, but I remember hearing copywriters talk about the fact that they got applauded for their writing and never and always just had the starving artist mentality and then discovered copywriting and realized that there actually is a world in which you can get paid to write. uh,
right,
and to some writers that feels like selling your soul. To others it was a relief to be able to do that. um,
right. Well, it really strikes me as the foundational element in all we're talking about is really curiosity. Has your curiosity died, or is it still alive?
Well, and also what happened with, again, in a conversation with somebody recently around this, around their career, I started asking questions. And it was just very simple questions like, how much money do we need to make? Well, we don't actually know. Okay, well, here's somebody. You should go have a conversation with this person because they'll help you find out. Oh, okay. Well, and
Right.
then they come back and they said, well, we think we can do it for this much. Okay, now you actually have a salary target that you're trying to earn. That's
Right.
helpful. What do you want to be doing? Well, you know, and these curiosity questions um, really start invoking progress because
Right. Right. And I'm probably pretty out there in this sense, but if how much money I'm going to make is your first question, that seems to me to be a safety and security issue. The first question for me would always be, and what potential is here? I'm curious about how this can impact the environment, myself included. Like, what would this look like? Is that intriguing to me? And then for me, the money comes way later, if at all. Curiosity is killed by fear, bottom line,
yeah.
always. And so if I'm afraid, then my curiosity is going to be very, very minimal. All my curiosity, all my creativity is going to go towards avoiding that fear rather than and engaging with the world. And going back to what we talked about last time, the three C's, like when my curiosity or my creativity is 100% engaged with avoiding fear, then that's the only focus I can have, which the only community I'm going to have is others who are using their curiosity and creativity to avoid fear. So there's not going to be connection on anything other than the avoidance of fear.
All right. So just because we're in the topic of career at the moment, so if your fear is not being able to, not having a job, not being able to provide for your family, that's the fear.
Yeah.
Um, then then you're likely to find other people who share similar fears,
Yep.
and you're going to feed fear with each other. Um,
You're going to become what you behold.
so so the challenge with this always is and always has been, how do you extract yourself from these influences that become an echo chamber of some kind
Right.
and immerse yourself into situations where curiosity is the thread,
Right. A very brave and bold choice to break away from the pack that is solely focused on fear.
right?
And that's a very painful habit to break. I would probably say, as far as addiction goes, there's certain things that are more addictive than others and that kind of thing. I think the most addictive thing is fear, and it leads to all these other addictions. To break that is really, really painful.
Um, so what is the why do you call fear addictive? What does that addiction look like?
It shapes a whole world around avoidance. Avoidance of that thing that makes me uncomfortable. Soothes the pain of the avoidance and the lack of engagement and the last lack of curiosity. It's really painful. If everything in my system says avoid these situations, they're dangerous, then when I start not avoiding these types of situations, when I start to get curious, every red light in my system is going to start going off. The internal network, the internal framework that's been developed, my ego will start revolting. You're doing something very dangerous. Yeah, you're right. I'm living according to how God designed me. And in this world, that is very dangerous.
Mhm. So fear ultimately keeps you from uncomfortable situations. That's fundamentally what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And discomfort
And
is good.
that can become the right thing. Going back to our conversation,
Right.
I can be conditioned to believe that that is the right thing to avoid anything that makes me uncomfortable.
So let's be honest. AI is uncomfortable
It's very uncomfortable.
because it's very novel. We don't have and it's for all of the reasons we don't know what people know that we don't know or, all of the reasons.
Yeah. Well, there's a writer we both respect. We were talking about earlier, and she had a publication removed from a, I don't know if it was website or magazine, whatever it was, because somebody had suspected that she used AI. It's catastrophic to her. I've read her writing for over a year.
Mhm.
Deeply powerful stuff. Very, very, very articulate, very moving, very whatever the case. The reality is that company, those people don't know her.
Right.
They don't know her. It's just an assumption that was made. They don't know her. I don't know her other than her writing.
Yep.
How about you sit down and have a conversation and be curious about it? How did you come to this? Because she is young. And so that kind of wisdom that I've read from her writing coming from somebody so young, my first thought isn't, oh, this had to come somewhere else. And we talked about it. My first thought is, what shaped you? How did
Right.
you get there at such an early age? I'm curious.
Yep. Yep.
But can we be curious about this rather than judgmental and harsh? Human beings, as we've shown, no, we can't be. There's this old analogy I heard once where it's like you put crabs in a bucket, and as soon as one starts to climb out, the others reach down and reach up and pull it down. It seems more often than not, as human beings, that's what we're doing. Don't get too high. Don't get out of this system. And I think that's what is scary too, because I try and get out, but I get dragged back in.
Mhm.
The old Godfather line. Every time I try and get out, you drag me back in. It's a very human thing.
Yeah.
But we were meant for freedom, for union, for connection. And if we try and move in that direction, get pulled back in.
Yeah.
That's really hard,
Wow.
catastrophically so.
And all this, we've had many conversations about this. All this stems from the point when comfort becomes one of your highest ideology, comfort and self-protection. And even with this whole pulling the article, it wasn't because of lots of research. It was because of a series of requests and comments suggesting that, from at least from my understanding, um, and so very likely fear of public opinion,
Mhm.
fear of um, it's far easier to say no to something like this than
Yeah,
to have to answer to your supervisor or your
right.
manager, or whoever's up the chain
Yeah,
on why did you do this?
right,
And they're not going to take the fall for it. You will.
right, right.
And this whole structure. I hope sometime in the next year we get to this topic, but I'm so curious if there's a way to really structure work to be done in such a way that self protection can largely be put to rest.
Yeah. Because in reality, this was just an emotional reaction. That's it. There was no thought process, there was no curiosity, there was no logic that went into it. It was we're going to be perceived as this and we can't be perceived as this. So we're going to sacrifice her by making this decision.
Right.
Bottom line, you can put all the fancy language and justification around it you want, but that's what was happening. We were afraid of losing respect, and that would be uncomfortable for us. And to me, the bottom line is character. And to me, again, the truth, the right is the person of Jesus. So this woman comes into a house where he's having dinner and starts crying on his feet and wiping her with her hair, or anointing his feet with perfume that's expensive, and everybody has all sorts of opinions about it. And not once does he try and manage their feelings. He goes,
Right.
she's doing the this story is going to be told from the end of time. She did the right thing. And you have all sorts of feelings about that. Okay, but you're wrong. And that's what we have to do sometimes.
Right.
I respect you and you have the right to make that choice. Of course you do. But that doesn't mean I have to go along with it.
Right. Well, I think it's also, if I can add this, um, it's an invitation to wrestle with your feelings. I, like
Yeah.
there is there's a wrestling, there's a knowing, like there's a I mentioned this to you before the podcast, but I spent a good bit of time this past weekend asking all kinds of questions about things I've wrestled with throughout my life, and not to not to relive the past, not to regurgitate the past, or not to live in regret, but to gain an understanding. And really, I hope that this is what it was. I trust that this is what it was, to wrestle with those feelings in such a way so as to come to the truth. I would at least I would like to hope that that was and I think it was. But you can't you have to have curiosity about your feelings themselves, and you have to have curiosity about what the truth is in alignment with and contrary to your feelings.
Right. Well, I think that's the major point here as far as right and wrong and objective and subjective and all that kind of stuff. In a conscious or subconscious way, we all have a tendency to avoid our thoughts and feelings
Right.
and instead project outwards to others
Yeah.
to avoid our thoughts and feelings.
Right.
And the reality is, okay, I get it. I totally get it. Makes sense. But it doesn't mean that that's healthy for anybody.
Right.
It's not what it means. So, can I be curious about my thoughts and feelings in a situation rather than projecting them outwards? That's the measure. Can I get to know myself?
Yeah.
I had a colleague yesterday who a student was very rude to her, said something about her hair and her appearance. And I was like, well, how did you feel about that? And her first thing was, it's a 13-year-old girl. If I was concerned with her feelings about me so much that it disturbed me, then, I'm in a very bad position. I was like, fair. And I was like, did it hurt? She was like, what? It wasn't what she said. It was the spirit behind it that hurt. Why? Why did you say that? What's going on in you? And she was hurting for her, for the student. And I go, that isn't analysis of your feelings. That's looking internal and going, this is what it's really about. This is what's really concerning to me. This is what hurts. I hurt for you, not because I'm hurt.
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. I don't know if we landed the plane, but
I don't know if we landed the plane
I
either.
feel like we have years to land the plane, so we're just gonna keep flying.
We were like, everybody's like, I mean, this is the key of a good series. This is all if you guys want to know the kind of mind manipulation that we're using here,
Right,
insert
right.
sarcasm. We
It's
are intentionally
very directed.
very directed. We refuse to land the plane so that you absolutely must start the next episode. And you are
To
like,
get you hooked.
to get you hooked. And I have Kevin on the show to be so absolutely crazy and untethered that you will wonder what in the world is he going to say next time. Uh,
Right. I mean, you're not wrong.
so that I can present myself as the one who is right and grounded and the voice
That's
of
right.
reason in this
But
conversation. I get to control the narrative here.
yeah.
Oh,
And I'm
gracious.
not gonna fight you for that role. Like it's all yours.
Oh boy. Kevin's like, hey, if you want that and all the consequences that go with it, be my guest.
It's all yours.
It's all yours. Enjoy. All right,
Enjoy.
fine. I give up. All right. Well, this has been a very intriguing conversation. It feels like there's a lot here that honestly probably needs more wrestling with to really unpack and articulate. I feel like there's a lot that even for myself, perhaps maybe I just haven't thought deeply enough about these topics, but it would do me good to wrestle with well enough to articulate even more simply than what we have. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
without a doubt. And we aren't, we say this all the time. We're going to say, we're not experts. We're just two guys sharing their opinions and their observations, and we're curious. That's it. We're just curious about these things.
yeah, agreed.
And so thank you for joining us in our curiosity search.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you guys are looking for to land on, well, actually, no, we do hope this. We hope that we're pointing you to objective truth and Christ as we've discovered him.
Yeah.
We hope that you find that. But if you be outside of that, if you're looking for objective truth and certainty in reality, probably not the podcast for you.
Yeah, you should probably try somewhere else.
Go try somewhere else. But if you love curious conversations,
Yeah,
we're here. We welcome you to be a part. You can find us on the platforms. Leave a comment and send us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time.
till next time, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.